The cantina on Haven Prime space station was dark and smoky. In the corner, a large alien sat alone at a table. His skin was thick and gray like armor. His left arm was missing, and deep scars ran across his face. This was Commander Kexel, of the Zephyrian Empire. He lifted a glass of burning liquid to his mouth and drank. The drink tasted like fire, but Kextal barely felt it anymore. He had been drinking for hours, trying to forget the memories that haunted him every night. The war was over now, 5 years passed, but the images still came back to him in dreams. A young female Zephyrian walked up to his table. She was small for their kind, barely 7 feet tall, with bright purple markings on her face that showed. She was still young. She carried a recording device in her hand. "Commander Kextal," she said in a soft voice. "Hey, my name is Valandra. I work for the Imperial News Network. Could I speak with you about the human war?" Kextal looked up at her with tired eyes. "Go away, young one. I have nothing to say about that hell." But Valandra did not leave. She sat down across from him without asking. "The people need to know what really happened out there. The official reports don't tell the whole story. The official reports are lies," Kexel said, then took another drink. "They say we won a great victory. They don't mention the cost." "Then tell me the truth," Valandra said. She placed a recording device on the table between them. Kexel stared at the device for a long moment. Tss. The alcohol was making him feel loose and angry. Maybe it was time someone knew what really happened when the Zephyrian Empire met the humans. "You want the truth?" he said. "It's fine, but don't blame me when you can't sleep afterward." He leaned back in his chair and began to speak. "Started 3 years before the war ended. We were expanding the Empire, like we always did. Planet by planet, system by system. We had done it 100 times before. Find a new world with intelligent life, demand their surrender, take their planet. Simple." Kextal paused to drink. "Again, then our scouts found Earth, a small blue world with primitive beings called humans. They had basic space travel, a few colonies on nearby worlds, nothing special. We expected them to surrender like all the others." The old warrior's eyes grew dark as he remembered. "I was a captain then, commanding the battle cruiser Storm's Edge. We jumped into their system with 50 ships. The humans had maybe 20 vessels to defend their whole world. We should have crushed them in an hour." Valandra leaned forward. Listening carefully, this was not what the history books said. "Captain Jake Morrison commanded their defense fleet," Kextal continued, a grizzled human with gray hair and cold eyes. "When Admiral Zerkith sent the surrender demand, Morrison's response was short. He said, 'Come and take it.' The alien veteran laughed, but there was no humor in it. We thought he was joking. No species had ever refused us before. They all saw our ships and our weapons and gave up without fighting, but not the humans. The first battle was near one of their gas giant planets. We used standard shock tactics. Hit hard and fast, show overwhelming force, wait for them to break and run. It worked every time before." Kextal's good hand gripped his glass tighter. "But the humans didn't run. They came straight at us, screaming battle cries over the radio. Their ships were smaller and weaker than ours, but they fought like demons. I watched a human pilot named Amy Watson ram her damaged fighter into one of our destroyers. Her ship was already burning, but she still had enough control to aim it. The explosion took out our entire forward gun battery." The memories were flooding back now, and Kextal could not stop them. Another human, Rick Davis, ejected from his dying ship and used his personal thrusters to fly into our hangar bay. He had grenades strapped to his chest. He killed himself just to damage our ship. Valandra was writing notes as fast as she could. This was incredible. The official records said the first battle was an easy victory with minimal losses. "We won that fight," Kextal said. "But we lost 12 ships and over 2,000 soldiers against 20 human vessels." Our commanders were shocked. No species had ever hurt us that badly in a single battle. The old soldier finished his drink and signaled for another. "That should have been our warning. We should have pulled back and thought about what we were facing. But the Empire doesn't retreat. We never had before. So we pressed the attack. More ships, more soldiers, more weapons. We would crush these humans through sheer force." Admiral Zerkith brought in the 3rd and 5th fleets. Nearly 3 ships total. The humans fell back toward their homeworld, but they made us pay for every light year. They turned their own space stations into bombs. When we took a human colony, the colonists would fight to the last person, then blow up everything valuable before we could claim it. Kexel's new drink arrived, and he gulped it down quickly. I remember one human commander, Pete Sullivan, who held a moon base with 300 troops against 5,000 of our soldiers. He turned the mining tunnels into a maze of death traps. For 6 weeks, we tried to dig them out. Every tunnel we entered was booby-trapped, every corner hid. Snipers. Sullivan's humans fought with captured weapons, improvised explosives, even their bare hands when they ran out of ammunition. The alien's voice grew quiet. When we finally took the base, we found Sullivan's body in the command center. He had been dead for 3 days, but his men kept fighting without him. They fought until every last one of them was gone. Valandra looked up from her notes. But you did win that battle, right? You took the base, Kextel said. If you can call losing 4,000 soldiers winning. We learned that humans don't just fight to survive. They fight to hurt you as much as possible before they die. The old warrior stared into his empty glass. It was another human, Kate Miller. She got trapped in a collapsed bunker during the siege. We thought she was dead. But for 3 days after, our patrols kept getting picked off by sniper fire from that bunker. This one injured human killed 30 of our soldiers before she finally ran out of bullets. That's when I started having the dreams, Kextal admitted. Dreams about human faces twisted with rage, about the way they smiled when they triggered explosives that would kill them along with us. My soldiers began jumping at shadows. We had faced death before, but never an enemy that seemed to enjoy dying if it meant hurting us. Valandra set down her writing pad. Commander, how could primitive humans be so effective against the Empire's finest troops? Kexal looked at her with haunted eyes. 'Cause we fight to win. Humans fight to fight. There's a difference, young one. When your goal is victory, you can be reasoned with, negotiated with, defeated. When your goal is just to hurt your enemy as much as possible, you become something else entirely. The cantina was quieter now, and other patrons were giving their table a wide berth. Even other species had learned to fear Zephyrian war stories. The worst part was that we were winning, Kexal said finally. Controlled space, we had better weapons, we outnumbered them 10 to 1. By every military measure, the humans were losing. But somehow, it felt like we were the ones being destroyed. Kextal ordered another drink and continued his story. The cantina around them had grown darker as the station's night cycle began. Other aliens at nearby tables had stopped their conversations to listen to the old warrior's words. 3 months into the war, everything changed, Kextal said. We had pushed the humans back to their home system. Earth was surrounded. Any normal species would have surrendered then, but the humans just got worse. Valandra looked up from her notes. Worse? How crazier? More violent? More willing to die just to hurt us? The old soldier's eyes grew distant. They had a commander named Lisa Harper. She ran their defense from deep underground on Earth. This human female came up with ideas that no sane military mind would ever consider. Kexal took a long drink before continuing. Harper started. Using civilian ships as weapons, cargo haulers, passenger transports, even small private craft. She would load them with explosives and send them at our fleet like guided missiles. The pilots knew they would die, but they did it anyway. The alien's voice grew bitter. We tried. To avoid hitting the civilian ships at first, our rules of war forbid attacking non-military targets. But Harper turned every ship into a weapon. We had to choose between dying or shooting civilians. What did you do? Valandra asked quietly. We shot them, Kextal said. And with every civilian ship we destroyed, the humans fought harder. They used our mercy against us, then punished us for stopping being merciful. It was brilliant and evil at the same time. The old warrior rubbed his scarred face with his remaining hand. Then there was the siege of Luna Base. I was there personally, leading a ground assault with 5,000 troops. The base was commanded by Pete Sullivan, just like I told you before, but I didn't tell you the worst part. Sullivan turned that moon into hell itself. He had 300 humans, and they knew every tunnel, every shaft, every hiding place. They set traps that would have made our torture specialists proud. Kexel's voice dropped to almost a whisper. We would enter a tunnel and the ceiling would collapse, crushing half my squad. The survivors would crawl forward and step on pressure, mines that filled the air with metal fragments. If anyone made it past that, snipers would pick them off one by one. But the humans didn't just kill us. They made sure we suffered first. They would wound our soldiers instead of killing them, then use their screams to draw more troops into traps. They learned our medical procedures and set up ambushes at our aid stations. Philandra stopped writing. That sounds like torture. It was torture, Kexel agreed. But it was also war. The humans didn't see a difference. Every day we stayed on that moon, more of my soldiers broke down mentally. They started seeing enemies in shadows, jumping at every sound. Some refused to enter the tunnels at all. Alien Commander ordered another drink. His words were getting slightly slurred, but his memories remained sharp and painful. There was one human woman, Kate Miller. I told you about her before, but not the whole story. When we found her body, she had been wounded for days. Her legs were crushed under rubble, and she had multiple gunshot wounds. But she kept fighting. We found her position in the tunnels. She had set up mirrors to see around corners and had stockpiled ammunition from dead soldiers. For 3 days, she picked off my troops one by one. When we finally reached her, she was delirious from blood loss and pain. But she still tried to detonate one last explosive. Kextel shook his head. Slowly, Miller died with a smile on her face. She was happy to die as long as she took some of us with her. The cantina was completely quiet now. Even the bartender had stopped cleaning glasses to listen to the story. After Luna Base, things got even worse. Kextol continued. The humans started using what they called the asteroid gambit. They would hide their ships inside mining asteroids and wait for our supply convoys to pass by. Captain Roy Fletcher led those attacks. He was their best pilot, and he turned asteroid fields into death traps. Our ships would be cruising through what looked like empty space. Then suddenly fighters would burst out of rocks and hit us from all sides. Fletcher's squadron destroyed 60 of our ships in 2 months. But the worst part was how he died. His fighter got hit during a raid and was burning up. Instead of ejecting, he aimed his dying ship at our command vessel and rammed it at full speed. Kexel's voice grew angry. The impact destroyed our entire tactical network for that sector. One human pilot, already dying, took out our ability to coordinate attacks for weeks. That single suicide run saved thousands of human lives and cost us hundreds of ships. I started having nightmares after that, the old soldier admitted. Not about dying, every warrior faces death, but about the way humans looked when they died. They were happy. They died with satisfaction on their faces because they knew they had hurt us. Valandra looked disturbed. Surely you're superior. Technology and numbers meant you were still winning. On paper, yes, Kexel said. We controlled more space, had more ships, more soldiers, but winning felt like losing. Every victory cost us more than it should have. Every human we killed seemed to make the others fight harder. The breaking point came during the Battle of Mars. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Park led a human ground assault against our staging area there. His troops were outnumbered 10-1, but they had captured some of our weapons and learned how to use them. The alien's hand trembled as he lifted his glass. Park's humans didn't just attack our positions. They studied us first. They learned our weaknesses, our tactics, our psychology. Then they used that knowledge to hurt us in ways we never expected. They would capture our soldiers alive and interrogate them. Not for information, for psychological warfare. They would learn about our families, our fears, our beliefs. Then they would use that knowledge to break our morale. One of Park's soldiers, a human named Carl, had been a teacher before the war. He spent hours talking to captured Zephyrians, learning about our culture. Then he would broadcast messages over our communication networks, telling our troops exactly how their families were suffering while they fought this useless war. Kexel finished his drink and stared at the empty glass. Carl died in the final assault on our command bunker, but his psychological attacks had already done their work. Half my regiment was ready to desert by then. The humans were fighting. A different kind of war, the old soldier said finally. We fought to conquer territory and defeat armies. They fought to break our spirit and make us afraid, and it worked. Valandra set down her writing pad. How did the Empire respond to these? Tactics badly, Kextal said. Command kept sending more troops and ships, but they didn't understand what we were really fighting. You can't defeat an enemy that wants to die as long as they can hurt you first. You can't negotiate with people who see death as victory. Old Warrior looked around the cantina. Other aliens were staring at him with expressions of horror and disbelief. That's when we realized the truth, Kextal said. We weren't fighting a war anymore. We were feeding ourselves into a meat grinder, run by demons who looked like people. The drinks kept coming as Kexal continued his story. His voice was rougher now, and his eyes held a haunted look that made other aliens in the cantina move to tables farther away. 2 years into the war, Admiral Zarkith arrived with the Grand Fleet, Kexal said. He was the Empire's greatest military mind, the hero of a dozen worlds. Command sent him to finish what we had started. Valandra looked up from her notes. I know that name. He won the Battle of Kepler Prime. Yes, he did. Against a civilized enemy that followed the rules of war. Kextal laughed bitterly. Sketh thought he understood human psychology. He had studied their tactics and believed he could predict their moves. He was wrong about everything. The old soldier leaned forward. Zarkith brought 800 ships to Earth's orbit, the largest fleet in Imperial history. The humans had maybe 50 vessels left. Any sane species would have surrendered immediately. But the humans weren't sane anymore. They had been fighting for 2 years, losing every major battle watching. Their worlds burn. It should have broken them. Instead, it made them into something worse than before. Kexal's remaining hand clenched into a fist. General Mike Stevens commanded Earth's final defense. This human had lost his home planet, his family, everything he cared about. He kept fighting with a cold fury that scared even his own soldiers. Stevens had been preparing for this moment. When our grand fleet arrived, we found that the humans had turned their entire solar system into a weapon. Every asteroid, every space station, every piece of debris had been rigged with explosives. The alien's voice dropped to a whisper. They had also done something that violated every rule of civilized warfare. They had armed their civilian population. Not just soldiers, but teachers, farmers, children. Everyone who could hold a weapon was ready to fight. The first wave of attacks came from converted civilian ships. Captain Ellen Brooks led a fleet of cargo haulers and passenger transports, all loaded with nuclear weapons. She turned merchant vessels into guided missiles. Kexal paused to drink. Brooks knew it was suicide. Her entire fleet knew. But they came at us anyway, broadcasting messages about their families and their world. I watched a grandmother pilot a school transport ship directly into one of our battlecruisers. The explosion took out half our forward line. These weren't military targets anymore. There were people who had chosen to die rather than live under our rule. Valandra stopped writing. It's horrible. It gets worse, Kextal said. While we were dealing with the suicide ships, human ground forces launched an impossible attack. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Park led an assault on our staging base on Mars. Park had 3,000 troops against our garrison of 30,000. He should have been crushed in hours. Instead, he turned the battle into a nightmare that lasted for weeks. The old warrior's voice grew thick with remembered fear. Park's humans had captured enough of our technology to understand how we think, how we fight, how we communicate. They used that knowledge against us in ways we never imagined. It would mimic our radio signals to send false orders. They dressed, captured soldiers in our armor, and used them to walk right into our camps. They learned our military protocols and used them to turn our own defenses against us. Kextal shuddered. But the worst part was the way they fought when cornered. I watched human soldiers with missing limbs continue to attack. I saw a human named Danny who had been shot 6 times still trying to strangle one of my troops with his bare hands. Park himself fought for 3 days with a piece of shrapnel in his chest. When we finally cornered him in a supply depot, he was bleeding internally and could barely stand. but he still managed to detonate enough explosives to level half our base. The alien commander ordered another drink with shaking hands. That's when I started to understand what we were really fighting. Not soldiers, not even warriors. Something else entirely. The turning point came when Major Beth Collins volunteered for a suicide mission. She led 20 humans in a direct assault on Admiral Zarkith's flagship. It was impossible. The ship was protected by shields, point defense systems, and a fighter screen. But Collins had studied our technology for months. She knew our weaknesses better than we did. Her team used captured equipment and improvised weapons to punch through our defenses. Kexthal's voice became barely audible. I was on the flagship when they breached the hull. Collins and her team fought their way through 6 decks of security. They killed everyone in their path, but they kept taking damage. By the time they reached the command center, only Collins was left alive. She was shot full of holes, burned by energy weapons, barely conscious, but she still had enough strength to place her explosives. The old soldier looked directly at Valandra. Collins looked Admiral Zarkith in the eyes and smiled. Then she triggered the charges. The explosion destroyed our entire command network and killed the greatest military leader in Imperial history. One dying human woman took out our fleet commander and crippled our ability to coordinate attacks. We went from an organized invasion force to a confused mob in seconds. Kexel finished his drink and sat in silence for a moment. That's when I knew we had lost. Not the battle, not the campaign, but the entire war. Every human in their solar system, more would keep coming. What do you mean? Valandra asked. Commander Jack Murphy and his raiders, Kexel said. While we were focused on Earth, Murphy had taken a small fleet deep into Imperial space. They were attacking our civilian targets, our supply lines, our home worlds. Murphy's humans fought like pirates and terrorists. They would strike a target, cause maximum damage, then disappear before we could respond. But they weren't just destroying military assets. They were targeting anything that would hurt Imperial morale.
Ow.
The alien's voice filled with rage and fear. They attacked medical facilities, schools, cultural centers. They broadcast messages showing the destruction they had caused, promising that it would continue until we withdrew from human space. For the first time in Imperial history, our own people were demanding an end to a war. Families were fleeing the outer colonies. Trade routes were shutting down. The entire empire was becoming paralyzed by fear of human retaliation. Kexthal looked around the cantina. That's when I realized the truth about humans. They don't just fight to win wars. They fight to make their enemies afraid to ever fight them again. The empire had 2 choices. We could continue the war and watch our entire civilization collapse under human raids, or we could withdraw and hope they would leave us alone. The old soldier's voice was bitter. Admiral Zarkith was dead. Our fleet was crippled. Our home worlds were under attack, and the humans were still fighting with the same insane determination they had shown from the beginning. Command finally admitted what every soldier in the field already knew. We couldn't win this war. It's not because we weren't strong enough, but because the humans were willing to pay any price to hurt us. Valandra set down her writing pad. So the Empire retreated? We didn't retreat, Kexel said. We ran, and we've been running ever since. Kexel was very drunk now, but his memories remained clear and painful. The cantina had nearly emptied as other aliens left to avoid hearing more of his story. Only Valandra remained, still taking notes as the old soldier continued. The war ended not with surrender, but with fear, Kexel said. The Empire pulled back from human space like we were running from a plague, because in a way we were. What do you mean? Valandra asked. The humans are contagious, the old warrior said. Their way of fighting, their refusal to give up, it spreads to other species. After word got out about what happened to us, other races started copying human tactics. Kexthal rubbed his scarred face. The peace talks happened here on Haven Prime. I was part of the delegation, though I kept my mouth shut mostly. Our diplomats expected the humans to be grateful that we were ending the war. They sent Colonel Sandra Wells to negotiate. Cold human female with dead eyes and scars covering half her face. She had been fighting us for 3 years and looked like she had enjoyed every minute of it. The alien's voice grew bitter. Our ambassador started by offering generous terms. We would withdraw from human space and establish a non-aggression pact. We thought Wells would be relieved. Actually laughed at our offer. Then she told us what the humans wanted in return for not continuing their raids on our territory. Kextal ordered another drink, though the bartender looked reluctant to serve him. Demanded that we classify humans as a protected species. It's not just a treaty, but a complete recognition that human space was forbidden to all Imperial forces. She also wanted reparations, resources, technology, access to our trade routes. And she wanted it all delivered by unarmed ships, because she said armed vessels near human space would be considered acts of war. The old soldier laughed bitterly.
Oh no, dear.
Our diplomats were outraged. They said we had won most of the battles controlled. Superior technology outnumbered the humans by massive margins. Wells just smiled and asked if we wanted to continue fighting. That's when she showed us the reports from our own intelligence services. Human raiders had penetrated deeper into Imperial space than anyone realized.
Oh.
They had established hidden bases in 12 star systems. They were recruiting other species to join their cause. Kexel's voice dropped to a whisper. Worst of all, they were learning. Every ship they captured, every base they raided, every prisoner they took, taught them more about our technology and tactics. They were becoming stronger while we grew weaker. Commander Jack Murphy had sent a message to the peace talks. A recording of him standing in the ruins of a Zephyrian colony. He said that every day the war continued, human raids would get bigger and more destructive. Eventually, they would start targeting the Imperial homeworld itself. The alien shuddered. Murphy wasn't bluffing. Our scouts had found evidence that human ships were already mapping routes to our core systems. They were planning an attack that would bring their insane warfare directly to our families. So we signed the treaty, Kexel said. We gave the humans everything they wanted and promised to stay out of their space forever. Our military classified them as a nightmare species. Valandra looked confused. What does that mean? It means humans are too dangerous to fight unless we have no other choice. Standing orders require all Imperial ships to avoid human vessels and never engage them in combat. Even a single human ship is considered a major threat. Skextel finished his drink and stared at the empty glass. The classification is based on psychological warfare capability and willingness to accept casualties. Humans scored maximum ratings in both categories. But the war is over now, Valandra said. Surely the threat has passed. The old soldier looked at her with haunted eyes. The war never ended for humans. It just moved somewhere else. There, expanding into new sectors of space, and every species they meet has the same choice we did. Submit to human terms or face human warfare. Most choose to submit. Quote, Kextal pointed across the cantina to where a young human sat alone at the bar. The human wore the uniform of the Earth Defense. Forzen quietly sipped his drink while other aliens gave him plenty of space. That's Danny Cruz, Kexel said. He's barely old enough to have fought in the war, but look how the others treat him. You're afraid of him, not because of what he's done, but because of what his species is capable of. Cruz doesn't need to threaten anyone. Its presence alone is enough to ensure that humans get whatever they want in negotiations. Everyone knows what happens when you push humans too far. Valandra watched as several alien traders approached Cruz's table cautiously, offering him free drinks and respectful bows. They're trying to make friends with him. They're trying to make sure he doesn't see them as enemies, Kextal corrected. Because if humans decide you're their enemy, they won't stop fighting until you're destroyed or they're all dead. And they breed fast enough that the second option isn't really an option. The old warrior signaled for another drink, but the bartender had cut him off. 5 years since the war ended, and I still have nightmares. Not about dying, not about the way humans looked when they fought. Happy, excited, like they were finally doing what they were born to do. Most species fight to survive, to protect their territory, to gain resources. Humans fight because they enjoy it. They've turned warfare into an art form, and they're very good artists. Kextel stood up unsteadily. You want to know why? Drink. Because alcohol is the only thing that lets me sleep without dreaming about human faces. About the way they smiled when they triggered explosives that would kill them along with us. The Empire won every major battle. We controlled space, had better weapons, outnumbered them by massive margins. By every measure of military success, we should have conquered Earth in months. The alien's voice grew quiet. Instead, we learned that there are some enemies you can't defeat, only survive. Humans taught us that lesson, and now the entire galaxy knows it. Valandra gathered her notes and recording device. Commander, do you think humans will seek revenge for the war? Kexthal stopped walking and turned back to her. I hope we never find out. Because if humans decide we're their enemy again, next time they won't be fighting just to survive. They'll be fighting to win. And I don't think the Empire would survive that. As Valandra left the cantina, she passed Danny Cruz at the bar. The young human nodded politely to her, then returned to his drink. Around him, alien traders and diplomats continued their careful attempts to stay on humanity's good side. The war was over, but its legend lived on. Humans had earned their place in the galaxy, not through diplomacy or trade, but through the most primitive currency of all fear. They had shown that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. In space stations across the galaxy, the story of the human war was told in whispers. How a primitive species had turned their disadvantages into weapons. How they had made the galaxy's greatest military power afraid to fight them. And how they had proven that in the vast darkness of space. The scariest monsters were the ones that looked just like people. Kexthal stumbled out of the cantina into the cold corridors of Haven Prime. Behind him, other aliens slowly returned to their tables, but the conversation remained quiet and subdued. Everyone had heard the story now. Everyone understood what humans were capable of. The war was over, but the fear remained. And as long as that fear existed, humans would be safe in their expansion across the stars. Because no one wanted to find out what would happen if they pushed humanity to fight again.